I'm back in Miami. This is what you guys wanted. Here I am, out here walking the streets, sweating like crazy so you don't have to. Actually, it's not so bad. It's only like 80 degrees today, so not terrible, especially for Miami. And you know what? It feels really good to be back. This is honestly the first time I've gone away in the summertime and was kind of looking forward to coming back here. I think because I was away for as long as I was, then it kind of made it something to look forward to, instead of like dread, because I'm coming back at a good time of year. It's winter, almost winter, and most of the heat and the hurricanes is going to be over with. So, but have you ever heard of such a crazy thing where if you inherit millions of dollars that it would actually ruin your life? Well, I have lots of crazy things to talk about. Not only are we going to talk about that, but I also want to talk about how the government could be slashing billions in spending pretty soon once Trump actually becomes president again. So we have a lot of interesting stuff to dive into in today's video. But when I read this, I was just like kind of floored, thinking like, how can inheriting millions of dollars actually ruin someone's life? I mean, this is what everybody's always hoping does happen to them one day, so they can retire and sail off into the sunset. So this story is about a couple that's in their 60s, and they say they have a daughter who is 43, and they also have a son who is in their late 20s, and they're worried about that if they were to die today, their children would inherit several $million, and they're worried that this would do them more harm than good. So they're trying to set parameters. They want to leave them a sort of trust where they're able to get some money for certain things, but not just get a huge financial windfall in the event that they were to pass away. Now, obviously these are rich people's problems, and I can't relate to this at all because I am not someone, or I don't know anyone, who has gotten a big financial windfall like this whenever their parents passed away. By the way, they're building all sorts of new stuff around here in Bay Harbor Islands. That building right behind me over here to my left, that wasn't there last time I walked around here. And right up ahead of me, they're building another one over here on the water. So it's just still crazy amounts of development happening here in Miami with seemingly no sign of slowing down. So the recommended advice for this couple in their 60s that has all this money that they're going to pass on down to their children is to work with an estate planner and make sure they get basically certain allowances at certain points in their life. Like, you get some when you turn 35, you get some when you turn 45, then you get the rest when you turn 55. But clearly these parents don't really trust their children if they're worried about how they're gonna spend their money after they're dead. Because the thing is, it's kind of up to them, right? At least it should be. If you're gonna inherit money and the money becomes yours, why are your dead parents still dictating how you spend that money? I understand if you're a delinquent or a drug addict or somebody like that who always, is terrible with money and they know for sure they would blow it the second they got it. That's a different story. Check it out, guys. Behind me, new building there, new building here. Bay Harbor Islands used to look like this. Now it looks like this. So actually the advice from the financial planner here is only set these parameters if you deem them to be fully necessary, like if you don't trust your kids for whatever reason. But the reality is that they should just be able to get the money and do what they please with it. You don't know what their circumstances are going to be in life when they come into this money. Maybe it'll be the perfect timing to buy a new house, or their kid starts going to college or whatever, and it can make the difference between the kid having to get a student loan and not getting a student loan. So there's certain things that could happen down the line where it shouldn't be up to the deceased parents giving the money deciding how someone else is supposed to use the money. And I'm sure anybody out there who's watching this right now that has any amount of money that they're looking to pass down to their children or other family members can probably sort of relate to this problem, even if it's not millions. But they say what you should do is you should sit down and talk with your children and ask them that if you were to die today, what would you do with all of this money? And actually tell them the real amount of money that you have so they understand how much money they would inherit, which I think is a little bit crazy, especially if you don't trust your kids. Who knows, maybe they'll have you whacked for your money. You know what I mean? You don't know what people are going to do. This whole thing with the Menendez brothers murders has been, resurfacing, and people are trying to get them freed out of jail and all of this. And a lot of people back then thought that they killed their parents for the money, which seems like there might have been other motivations if you know anything about this. But the point of the story is there is you can't even trust your own kids sometimes. So to sit down and tell them how much money you have and hope that they're going to want to keep you alive after that could be a risk for some people. And I'm saying that, you know, kind of jokingly, but also seriously. I just cannot understand what these parents are saying when it comes to the fact that they're worried that millions of dollars is going to ruin their kids' lives. Like, when have you ever heard a story where millions of dollars ruined anyone's life, guys? Usually it's the lack of money that ruins people's lives and, you know, their quality of life and comfort of being able to live a good life, you know, always struggling, trying to scrape by and pay the bills and all of that. So if I inherited millions of dollars tomorrow, that solves any future financial worries that you have to think about. If you get a lot of money like that all of a sudden and you invest it properly, you could easily never work again. It's going to be another one there too. This piece of land has been empty forever, ever since I've lived here in Miami. Now they're finally building something there. This whole place is just blowing up right now. It's interesting, even though I've only been gone for 5 months, it seems like so much has changed in just the short 5 months I've been gone. You know, all these new buildings already going up and new ones that were already under construction basically done now. And the reason why I think it's interesting that they're worried about this ruining their children's life is because most people literally have the opposite problem right now, guys. In fact, there was a new report out about how the household debt just hit a new record level of $18 trillion, which is up 8% from just 1 year ago. So clearly a lot of people would like to inherit that kind of cash and it would solve a lot of their financial problems. But yeah, everything's great. You know, the economy couldn't be any better, even though people are going into record amounts of debt right now. And this is all happening at a time when interest rates are at decades high. You know, average credit card interest rate is at 22% right now. Average auto loan is at 8.8%, but can go up to 11 or 12% for used cars. You know, mortgage rates hovering right at 7% as well. Borrowing money for pretty much anything is not cheap right now. You know, they talked to this woman who is in $60,000 in debt right now, and she was laid off a few times over the past couple of years, and she had to pretty much get by on her credit cards. And I knew a lot of people like this during the last financial crisis, guys. In fact, several people who I used to work with, real estate agents in my office, were doing just that. They were living on their credit cards because sales dried up. Commissions were a lot lower as well because sale prices had fallen so much. So you got lower sales and lower commissions. Bad combination for real estate agents. People were getting by on credit cards. But this person, you know, she has to go into debt consolidation now, and she's now paying $535 a month for the next 5 years to get out of this debt. So I'm sure she was wishing she had rich parents to get a windfall from right now. Here's a nice empty lot. No construction yet, but right across the street, more construction. Geez, how many is that already, you know? This is another one right across the street that's still in development. I'm pretty sure this whole island is gonna be brand new buildings within the next 10 to 15 years. All these little places are gonna be completely knocked down and gone. Now I wanna get over to the government spending part that I talked about at the beginning of this video because I thought this was extremely interesting as well. And honestly, I was unsure of how to start off this video. I didn't know which story you guys would find more interesting. You know, this inheriting millions will ruin your life story, or how much Elon Musk could slash billions of dollars in federal spending once Trump gets back into office. Because I think these are both pretty fascinating stories. Now, one thing that Elon Musk has been doing with his own companies over the past couple of years in order to cut back on staff and ultimately expenses for his companies is to require people to come back and work in the office. He's done it with Tesla, done it with SpaceX, and also with X, formerly known as Twitter. A bunch of the other big tech firms are doing this as well. This is nothing new. So if Trump gives him a cabinet position or some sort of role in the government to help cut back on spending like they're talking about right now, then this is something that he's looking at doing, which is bringing back government workers into the office, because a lot of them are working remotely right now. There's 2.3 million civilian workers from the government, and more than 1 million are eligible for telework, with another 228,000 or so in fully remote arrangement. As it stands right now, about 60% of federal workers are represented by a union, and of course unions have collective bargaining power and agreements in place that cover their ability to work remotely at least sometimes. One of the union presidents, who is the head of the education department of 2,800 workers, said that most of them are fully remote, but the union would first try to negotiate and then file a grievance if a return to office mandate were unilaterally put into place. And if that didn't work, then they would move on to arbitration. And so take a look at this. Among the telework eligible employees from the federal government, 61% of their working hours were spent in the office as of May of 2024. They say that actually exceeds the goal of only 50% of the time being spent in the office. So they're pretty happy with those stats over there at the federal government. And if you're wondering how a return to office mandate would somehow lower the spending when it comes to these federal workers, well, don't forget, the answer is the same as it is in the private workplace where they do this as well. When they have the return to office mandates, a lot of people end up quitting. In fact, when they did this at SpaceX back in 2022, 15% of people quit due to the return to office mandate. So what they're going to be looking at doing is trying to get a lot of these federal employees to quit who don't want to come into the office. And they can also do even sneakier things, like not only require you to return to the office, but change your home office that you're required to come into. So if you're somebody that moved during the pandemic, for example, you see this a lot these days, you move far away from your home base, or in this case, you didn't even move far away from your home base, but you get shifted to another office and now you're required to work in the office that's now 300 or 500 miles away from where you live. Another one here. I've already lost count. It had to be like 6, 7, 8 new buildings already that are actively going up or almost up or practically done. So here's how much the government could be looking at saving if this return to office mandate was put into place. So they're looking at, if 25% of people just quit, and the average salary being about $64,375 a year, that would save the federal government about $18 billion annually, or about $71 billion during Trump's next term. If 50% of them left, it would save $142 billion. Got another one here. Kitty corner from the last one over there. Even I'm in disbelief of how many places they're putting up right now, guys. But guess what? All of these new buildings, every single one of them, these are being built for the rich. Nobody poor is buying these places. These are all going to be multi-million-dollar buildings. Another one that they were building before, last time I was over here, looks like it's completed now, which I'll be showing you in a minute. So a lot of people might look at this and say, well, you know, saving $71 billion over 4 years isn't anything compared to the amount of trillions that we're in debt of right now. The thing is, if you're gonna look at starting to save money, I see it like this: you have to start somewhere, right? Just like a person that is living beyond their means and is spending far too much, you have to stop the bleeding somewhere. You have to look at your budget and say, okay, what can I cut right off the top? And then you continue making adjustments from there. So a lot of people might look at this and say, well, that $71 billion is nothing, but it's not nothing. That's our money, guys. That's taxpayer money that maybe just wouldn't be spent anymore. And maybe they're able to save another $100 billion somewhere else. Maybe they'll even be able to get into $500 billion at some point of savings over the next 4 years. That's a significant amount of savings. It's a start. Whether or not this will actually happen, I don't know. This is all just talk right now. But at least it's something that they're thinking about doing, because obviously spending is the biggest problem our government has right now. Last time I walked over here, this place was still under construction, and now it's finished, and you can see there's people living up there. They got balcony furniture. Another one under construction over the corner there. I'm not gonna walk over there because it's too crazy. They got cops and everything blocking the street. But wow, this is just crazy. When I first moved here, guys, this whole island was just like that building right there. You know, mostly, you know, you had that big one and a few of these other big ones, but it was just all these little old buildings from, you know, the 50s, the 60s, and now it's all going to be brand new. And I've discussed this in previous videos. In some ways it's good, in some ways it's bad. And while all this is going on, we just saw another sector of inflation continue to rise. We just had the PPI, also known as the Producer Price Index. The PPI just went up 0.2% in October, which is even faster than the September increase that we saw. And the increase in wholesale prices in the 12 months ending in October climbed to 2.4% from 1.9%. And this is the highest level that we've seen in 4 months, guys. So pretty much all of the inflation readings that we're getting right now, PPI, the PCE, core inflation. So the core inflation numbers right now are continuing to go up, guys. The last reading was at 3.3%. The most recent reading came in at 3.5%. So things are still going in the opposite direction. And remember, the Fed is actively cutting rates. They've already cut rates twice, probably looking at one more rate cut in December before the year is over. And then supposedly it's going to be a wait and see next year. Like, you don't even have to wait. You can already see right now what's happening. What's happening is inflation is coming roaring back. So whether or not they did all this in hopes of it helping the election and swinging things in whatever political direction they were hoping for, I don't know if they got their way or not, but it doesn't really matter because the rate cuts are not working. Interest rates for borrowing on car loans, on credit cards, and mortgages continues to be extremely high and has actually gone up since the rate cuts. And now we're seeing inflation reignite. Well, this will be my last walk over here for a while because it's just too noisy with all this work going on around here, but at least we got to see what's going on. But the thing is, they can't even hide this anymore because for a while they were pointing to the CPI like, hey, look, it's going down. Well, now that's going back up too, guys. The last reading was at 2.4%. Now the most recent one from October is up to 2.6%. So all inflation, PCE, core inflation, CPI numbers, all going back up as the Fed cuts rates. Think about it. Another thing that could potentially cut spending once Trump gets back into office is the elimination of the EV tax credits. Finally, guys, finally, they're looking at getting rid of this bogus tax credit that is basically a subsidy for people to go out and buy electric cars that consumers have said time and time again that they don't want. You know, people vote with their wallets, right? And the vote is showing that people don't want these cars because most people are still not buying them. In the third quarter of 2024, only 9% of the brand new cars that were sold were electric cars. And you know, you can look at states like California where 25% of the brand new cars that were sold were electric. But still, guys, even in a place like California where there's all these extra incentives beyond the federal tax credit to drive these cars, you still only have 1 in 4 people choosing to drive one. Take a look at this clip from the news right here.
It's unclear at this point whether their goals will change. Ohio Senator-elect Bernie Moreno is a former car dealer, and he says he'd like to get rid of the tax incentive that comes with buying an electric vehicle. He states that the government should not subsidize this purchase because the government thinks the vehicle is better than others, and he says we're about to see the golden age of automotives in the U.S.
We're going to create a tax environment that rewards companies, that brings back jobs to the U.S., and we're going to have a tax policy that gives you a different tax rate if you take our jobs and ship them overseas.
Moreno also wants to prohibit California from setting its own emission standards that are followed by several other states. He wants to create one unified emissions policy in the entire nation. In California, the largest auto market in the country, 1 in 4 vehicles sold is electric. Electric vehicles made up almost 9% of new cars in the country in the third quarter of 2024. Tesla has slashed prices to make their cars more attractive to consumers several times, and there's concern from the traditional U.S. automakers that China's cars could hit the U.S. auto market as they are significantly cheaper. For example, BYD's Seagull is just about $15,000 in China.
So this will save substantial amounts of money as well because that's a $7,500 tax credit to people who buy these electric cars. The current tax credit as it stands is set to expire only in 2032. So what they would be looking at potentially doing is moving up that expiration date so that these tax credits expire sooner. So why they don't just let them expire immediately and start saving the cash, I don't know. And of course they try to turn this into a political issue and say, well, because it's the Biden administration that started this tax credit, then of course it's going to be the Trump administration that goes ahead and cuts it just because it wasn't, you know, put in place by them. But the reality is, like we talked about earlier, is we need to find ways to start shrinking the spending of the federal government. It's gotten too large. We literally can't afford it. We are going broke. We're already broke. We're already bankrupt if you look at the numbers. The deficit continues to grow. In fact, that's another point I can make here. But then if they're serious about this, if the Republicans are serious about saving money and saying that it's all about saving money, then what they can't do is they can't go in and put in new tax credits or other ways that are going to increase the deficit even further, because then it really is just a political agenda. It's not about saving money. It's just about eliminating one person from saving money or getting a tax credit and shifting it over to somebody else, which is what we don't need to do. Apparently, they asked Elon Musk about this, if they actually cut this tax credit, what he would think about it, and he says that he doesn't really care, he wouldn't be upset about it, and he thinks it might actually be good for Tesla in the long run. I don't know how, but I don't really care because I'm not buying a Tesla. The real problem, though, is a lot of these auto manufacturers have shifted their focus into building these EV cars. They have literally invested and spent billions of dollars into this new technology and have lost billions of dollars since then trying to push electric cars down people's throats when clearly people don't really want them, because if they did, they would just be selling like crazy, but they're not. Remember, only 9% of all brand new car sales over this past quarter were electrics, guys. That's hardly anything. And the way I see it is they already can't sell these cars now with the $7,500 tax credit in place, and also some states have additional tax credits. I remember over the summer I made a video talking about how in Colorado you can buy a Nissan Leaf for as low as like $30 a month or something ridiculous like that, because of all of the tax credits and incentives to buy these cars. But people still don't want them. So imagine once they take that tax credit away, how much the demand is going to fall even further. The cars are going to be even more expensive because the tax credit will be gone. You know, it's not just the price that's making people resist buying them. There's a lot of other factors like the charging, range anxiety, and all the things we've talked about before on the channel. So having these cars become more expensive overnight isn't going to do them any favors in helping them sell more of them. And I feel like this is when also the government, you know, every time they make one of these policies or a new law, tax credit, whatever, like every 5 years or so, everything should be reevaluated. Like, we put this into place, is it working? You know, is it really helping achieve the goal that we set out for it to achieve? Or is it really not doing anything besides costing us a lot of money? And then they should be making decisions from there about whether or not these programs should continue to exist. But of course they never do that. They put these programs into place for, you know, decades at a time and don't care about the results. They never check to see, you know, whatever we're doing, is it working? Which leads me to my last point, which is the federal deficit, guys. The federal budget deficit in October was about $257 billion, which is up 287% from just 1 year ago. Imagine if you were looking at your household expenses and you realized that you were spending 287% more than just a year ago. Do you think you would start maybe tightening up your spending and maybe taking a second look at where is all this money going? Maybe. You know, last October it was 191 billion, which is already ridiculous, but now it's 257 billion. Economists, they estimated that the deficit would only come in at 72.7 billion. Can you imagine, guys, how wrong these guys were? 72.7 billion was the prediction. It actually came in at 257 billion. And because of all this, the yields on the 10-year treasury continue to go up, which is why we see the cost of a mortgage continue to go up and the cost of car loans continue to go up as well. I gotta say one thing, I'm not happy that we're in this mess as a country, but I really do think it's very interesting to watch all of this play out. You know, all these moving pieces. We have the inflation numbers coming back. We have the Fed cutting interest rates. We have borrowing costs on long-term debt going up. We have treasury yields going up. And this is all happening at the same time. We have the deficit, massive blowout number, much higher than expected. Like, where does it go from here? Well, we know where it goes from here just by looking at past experience, which is what nobody wants to admit. And it goes way, way down from here, guys. It looks like the good times are gonna be just about over here. But you know, I'll be here to report on all of it and keep you guys posted of what's really going on out there. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't wanna wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.